Go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is just after 4 o'clock according to the clock up there. Jim Wilson, if I could ask you to give our invocation.
I certainly will. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings of this day. Father, we ask this as we undertake the business of this city, that we do it in a manner that is indicative of your glory and your kingdom. Father, we ask thee to lead us and guide us in every decision we make today, always with the idea of the enhancement of our great city. We ask all of these things in Christ's name and for his sake. Amen.
Amen. All right, we'll lead off with item number 1, which is our Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because of the Open Meetings Act that requires an item be posted on the agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. So do I have any visitors that would like to speak? All right, if none, we'll move on to item number 2.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Could we possibly switch the order and move 4A and after 4B? But harm anything?
I don't see that it would. Anybody have a problem doing that?
No.
Okay, we'll just switch 4A and 4B. Thank you. All right. Item number 2, approval of minutes for the regular meeting held on August 21st of 2017, and then also the special meeting held on September 7th, 2017. Once you've read those, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
We approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Can I ask one question?
Certainly.
I wanted to verify, it's in here, but I just wanted to make sure, because we kind of went back and forth. We approved $140,000 for KEDC, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
it was 140.
Okay, so is that 80?
That's what it's in here, I just wanted, but, you know, we kind of went back and forth on some things at that meeting.
It was 140.
140?
Yes.
Is that the number?
Up to
That's what we
180.
approved.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Give me just a second, I want to review that.
This is proposed budget here that's back in the.
It's in the minutes, Ken.
Okay. I just want to make sure we have the right number.
Yeah, it's in the
I
minutes.
saw it.
And you guys are in agreement that that's the right number?
140, yes.
Okay, I'm seeing on page 24, 180.
We approved to leave 180 in the budget.
I thought that's what we're
We
asking.
approved to give KEDC 140 to start. That's what we did.
Yeah, my recollection
And
was
up to
that
180.
that we would go up to 180 with another comeback if they needed the 40.
Correct.
Right, okay.
So do the minutes reflect that properly?
Maybe there needs to be some clarification.
It kind of puts a finite amount on it in the minutes,
Let's see.
technically.
Up to 180, yeah.
Yeah, up to, but we revised the request.
I can add that.
If you don't mind, make that addition, if everybody's okay with that, that we, the true approval was 140 immediately and then 40 later at an additional request.
Okay, I'm in my motion to so reflect that.
I second it.
So now, any other discussion with regard to the minutes of either of these meetings? All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? All right, those minutes have been approved. On to item number 3, which are our monthly reports and our monthly financials for August of 2017.
Good afternoon. Beginning on page 11 in your agenda, this is the operating fund, your sales tax improvement fund. The beginning cash was $2,647,756. You had income during the month of $309,946, had expenditures of $101,561, leaving you a cash balance of $2,856,140. On page 12 is the detail of your budget, your current period expenditures, your year-to-date, and the remaining balances. On page 13 is the sales tax revenue analysis for the year, and year-to-date compared to 2016, you're at 5.43% over last year's collection and at 1.81 of your budget. On page 14 is your capital projects fund. Your opening cash was $1,869,155. You had no income or expenses during the month, so therefore your cash balance remained the same. Page 15, that is the committed project summary of the things that you're participating in at this time. And again, that ties back to the cash on the page before of funds that are still sitting there to be allocated to the capital projects fund that when it goes over to the city. Page 16 is a more detailed breakdown of projects that y'all are participating in. You're not funding all of it, you just have some interest in it, and it shows the sources, the EIC, general fund, water sewer fund, other funds, loans, bond proceeds, and the balance of those projects that y'all are participating in at this time that have not been completed. And on page 17, it gives you the breakout of where your cash and investments are. Your cash operating is in Wells Fargo, and then your other investments are in short term.
All right. Any
Okay.
questions for Sandra?
Yeah, I just have the one. The two line items that still have a balance that I guess need to be expensed, is there a reason when we choose to do those? The housing and the streetscape, is there a reason why?
That we'll do those before we close the end of this year.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Sandra. Now, item 3B, which is our projects update. EA?
Good afternoon. I've got
Good
4 items to update you on. Reuse distribution mains, currently all the bores have been completed under 173 East Main and over to Shriner University. We've got approximately 12,000 linear feet that have been accomplished out of the approximately 30,000. So things are moving along. We do feel like the reuse distribution mains will be complete in the January timeframe. So right now we are on track for that. Hopefully we'll continue to have good weather. River Trail West, we are in the final stages of the engineering on that. We do think that will be complete by the end of the month, and we are hoping to have bids going out into this month, beginning of next month, and have a better idea of what that construction will entail. Kerrville Sports Complex, we have reached the substantially complete status and are working through punch list items, so things are looking good out there. Tenor Center improvements, as we stated last time, we have led a contract for the design engineering services with Strickle Rollins and Associates, and they will be kicking off that project here later this month, beginning of next month. So excited to have that moving forward. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I see on the reports that the tennis center's been funded. It has a 0 left in it. It's not in our project balance. Is that right, Sandra?
It's been moved over to the Capital Projects Fund, I believe.
Is that where it is now?
Yes.
Yeah, they moved
Okay.
it.
And that total was 750, correct?
750 for
Each
this
year.
year, 750 for
That's what
next
I
fiscal
remember.
year. That's correct. Total of 1.5.
I thought that was right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any
I
other
probably
questions?
asked that last month too.
No,
I
that's
just
okay.
can't get that
You can
figure
ask
in my
next month
mind.
too. It's no problem.
Well, wait, I got a couple of questions, real quick.
Yes, sir.
The River Trail West, I keep hearing different things from different people. So how far, what we're designing or whatever right now, how far is that taking us?
It will take us from where the current termination spot is, which is just west basically of the Nature Center,
Right.
over to the Palacios del Guadalupe area. It will also have a sidewalk extension that comes up to the current sidewalk along Guadalupe Street.
Okay, so we're not going to that park, that Guadalupe Park?
No, like I said, it will connect to the sidewalk, and so,
You can
you know,
take the
patrons will
sidewalk
be able to
down,
take the
right.
sidewalk, but the trail itself will not extend along that
Is
path.
that our long-term goal for that section is gonna be on the street sidewalk, or are we ever thinking of going?
Right now, that hasn't been designed, and it's
Okay.
not on any current plans, but it could be the desire of the council or the EIC in the future.
Okay, and when do we expect to turn the keys over to DBAT as far as the athletic complex? They don't have it yet, or
Yep.
to city parks, I guess, is really what I mean.
They are still working through, there's quite a bit of construction still going on the DBAT facility. We're anticipating right now, end of November. Hopefully they'll be ready to go. It may push into December.
Okay,
Yeah, they'll have some finish out work that they've got to accomplish on the inside, but our part of it, we feel like will be done, kind of mid to late November timeframe.
so the developer or contractor will be essentially handing it over to the city in November, maybe December? Is that what we mean?
Yes, sir, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right,
That's correct.
thanks. That's all.
Sure thing.
All right, any other questions for EA on the projects?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, EA.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 4, and with the switching 4B to 4A, we will start with 4B, which is the review and possibly reconsider the Economic Improvement Corporation budget for fiscal year 2018. And that budget, as is proposed, is on page 24.
Thank you. As you recall, this was an item that was reviewed by the EIC on August 21st of 2017. It was approved at that meeting, went to the city council. The motion to approve that budget failed on a 2-2 vote. This budget does allocate a little less than $4.8 million for fiscal year 2018. I'd be happy to go through the details of the budget again if you have any questions for me.
I don't think I have any questions.
It's the same budget.
Same budget that we had last time.
It's the same budget as presented on August 21st.
So what happens next, since it was not approved at the last council meeting?
The EIC has the option to reconsider the budget and modify it as you see fit, or you could leave it as is, and that will essentially go back to the council in any way that you move it forward. The
So
council
no-
will have a budget meeting for the second part of their budget on September 26th.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so as it is proposed right now, it's going back to them.
Yes, sir, this is the budget that, at this point, that the EIC has approved. You have the option to reconsider it if you should choose to.
Do we need to take any action if we don't do anything? I mean, is there any action that needs to be taken?
I don't believe so. Mike, you may want to
You
weigh
all
in here.
approved it. Council hasn't approved it. It's kind of in this, it'll go back to council for their consideration as part of their, it's not part of their overall budget, but part of that process.
It's one of the component unit funds.
If I might, can I just interject, being so I'm sitting on council, and just try and clarify what we're actually focused on? You know, I got a little paragraph, so pardon me, because it's easier if I just read it than mumble through. In its mandated oversight capacity of all EIC spending, City Council discussed making one change to the EIC budget related to the line item regarding KEDC funding, which I think everybody's aware of. In order to fully fund KEDC's FY18 expense budget, EIC had previously approved providing $140,000 upfront funding to KEDC to be transferred, I guess, October 1st. City Council has only asked to have the EIC budget reflect this. Well, in full disclosure, City Council didn't actually ask this, okay? So this is what we were discussing, though. City Council asked to have the EIC budget reflect this agreement by lowering the line item in the budget expense from 180 down to 140. If and when KEDC is prepared to make a detailed future request for more funding, which they haven't really done for that amount of money, they may make that presentation again to EIC, and then secondarily City Council. The council simply wishes to retain its oversight authority with regards to the EIC spending. So it's not actually changing anything, it's just adding what City Council already has, which is approval or consent, I guess you'd say, over spending agreements. And so that the one change that was held up was moving that line item in the budget from 180 to 140, so that city council could have then be involved in the discussion when they come back for more, if that makes sense.
Would the city council not be involved in the discussion if they came back for more?
If we leave it alone right now, it doesn't have to. The budget would be approved, if the budget gets approved with the 180 in it, then if KDC comes back to EIC to ask for that other 40, it doesn't go to city council. It just, because it's already been approved. So that's really all that's going on. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand
Yeah,
what you're
okay.
saying.
So I don't know what.
Well, I don't see why we should have any concern about city council having another look at what we're asking them to spend. They get a look at anything we spend, and this is just, if it comes back, we're gonna have to take an action on it. I understand what they're saying, George, I mean, speaking kind of sort of for the council in that regard, or you were anyway. Is there any, would there be any objection to changing that to 140? And then, I mean,
There was some pretty hearty discussion, as we all know.
yeah,
Yeah.
we did, yeah.
And so, you know, if you reflect back upon the various people who stood right there and spoke to that issue, there's a lot of weight to that, to what I heard personally, sitting there in the audience, and in support of, and I'm not saying that if it was 140, it would not be in support of KEDC in its entirety. However, I think some of the arguments that were made at the podium really do support kind of going above and beyond, and maybe that's the wrong phrasing, but really allowing for the full amount. And then if they do not spend it, then certainly it would come back to us. And there was, I mean, we spent a long time discussing that. And so to answer your question, I guess I do offer a bit of pushback on reducing it based on the discussion that I heard that last Tuesday.
Which is fair. The issue at hand really is, it's been said on numerous occasions that any unused funds would go back to the stakeholders in pro rata fashion. And in fact, what we're proposing when we propose 140 is to do just that. They have the reserve that's unused funds, and he hasn't presented a detail of how to expense those funds. So he hasn't really requested with a true expense line item like he did with the other things, you know, like marketing, I'm gonna do this and this and this. And so, and he has admittedly changed what he plans to use it for a couple of times in the last couple of months. So all that council's asking for is to essentially, when he's ready, he can present it just like he can right now, but when he's ready to, that he present that just like any other funding agreement would go. You know, it would just be the secondary approval.
Well, I personally think that our board voted and council has heard what we approved as far as our budget goes, including the KEDC funds. And it is a little bit in my face personally that council takes it to that level, that they can't trust the decision that this board would make with the extra $40,000. And that's the pushback I'm giving. Secondly, the pushback is that we agreed with KEDC on a 3-year basis, with the exception of appropriation of the funds, $180,000. And so, you know, we got their agreement sitting right here in front of us not to ask for the $40,000 unless they had something specific. And I think that 7 of us can approve that. And I don't know, it's a little bit unnerving that we can't be trusted with the additional $40,000. I just have a tough time with that, George.
Well, and that's okay, except keep in mind that it's not really about trust. It's simply about, from the council standpoint, it's going to be essentially usurping its oversight authority, which it already has. and it's not because the council is demanding it, it's because the law requires it.
Sure.
And so if we're really just talking about that, it's not really in anybody's face unless, I would argue, we were to, knowing how council feels, return this budget unchanged. We're basically playing a game of chicken that I don't think makes a lot of sense if all we're really talking about is whether or not council maintains its current oversight, which it has. The EIC has already seen fit to put a pause on simply handing over the money. Council is reacting to that and saying, good call. And when he comes back, I don't see, if he comes back with a reasonable presentation of what he wants to do with it, I don't see why that would be turned down on its face, but he hasn't done that yet. And all he has done so far is present one item that, for, I assume, discussion reasons, backed off of, and came back with a different one, but he didn't put a dollar amount on it. Why not just ask him to do that? That's
Well,
really
when you say that the council, aren't you talking about 2 members voted for it and 2 members voted against it? Isn't that a fact?
That's a fact.
Well, the way you're presenting is if the council had made that decision. That's not true. That budget did not pass, and there were 2 individuals on that council that voted for the budget. And I think let's make that clear, very clear.
Okay, and you've made it clear, and it's absolutely correct. And so here we sit, and we have to read tea leaves, okay? And you're absolutely right. There was only 4 out of the 5 there. So, again, the budget as presented failed. So what do we want to do with that? Do we want to risk pushing it out there and having it fail again simply because we don't want council to have a simple oversight ability? Or does it make more sense to go ahead and make the change, and when the detail comes forward, then present it to council? And if they were to turn that down, then all the argument about whether or not they're being obstructionist or not can be played.
But I think that conversation's already been had, and the decision's already been, what you just said, those were your same reasons for it the last time, and this board made a decision. And to have another vote on that, to me, seems like we're rehashing the same thing we already voted on, so.
That's okay. I mean, I don't wish to belabor it. I'm just saying that I think as a body here, we do a disservice by playing a game of chicken, which I believe we would be, but I'll leave it there.
I'd like to point out that initially, KEDC came in with a $180,000 request, which is in pursuant to the agreement that we have, which this coming year is the last year of that. And they revised it to put it on a cash basis because one of our members asked it to be put on a cash basis. And they came back and they reduced it voluntarily by the 40, taking a portion, certainly not all, but a portion of their reserve that they've got built up. There was some discussion as to why they need a reserve at all, okay? And I thought it was good of Brian to come back, KEDC to come back and reduce it. And in that with that reduced amount and the understanding that they would need to come back to get an approval on it. It's not, they're not entitled to it without having an adequate presentation to come back, and they would have to come back here to do that. So I mean, I can understand both sides of the argument easily. I just don't see any reason as, in George's terms of, playing chicken with the deal. Should we put a footnote to, if we go back with the 180, should we put or with 140, should we put a footnote on it that reflects what was actually done, so that if somebody looking at the budget understands that this 40 is a contingency as opposed to an actual, we agreed to fund this amount of money?
I mean, I would say that as Kenneth alluded to a few minutes ago, and as the great Yogi Berra said, this is deja vu all over again. This is what we discussed last month, and we're just rehashing. I understand that you're wanting to clarify and make note of the differentiation between the two, but we've been through this.
But it's not reflected in the budget, so maybe that would be of some consequence.
And the other thing is, I'll admit to this being a lack of understanding on my part, but as the minutes were a little confused, I was too when we left our last meeting in the discussion. I did not realize that we had left 180 in our budget. I thought we had left 140. It was only after the meeting that I discovered that. So again, that's my mistake. We left it the way we left it, but I wasn't obviously the only one confused by that, because the minutes, I guess, reflected that.
I would certainly suggest that, my suggestion would be that we change it to 140 and footnote it. Or even have 180 and footnote the 180 that says only 140 is being funded now unless they come back with something else. And would you see footnotes in people's financial statements all the time?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, sometimes that's where you really get the information.
I think that's
That's
a great idea. I
idea,
think that's a
Gary.
great idea.
Let's do the
Because we
180
approved the
with
180
a footnote.
with a
Well,
footnote.
That's a compromise of some sort. I think it makes some sense.
Mhm.
At least everybody knows what's going on,
Sure.
Right.
okay?
I
all
don't
about
yet. What
clarity.
did you just say?
I said we
180?
leave 180 in there, but we asterisk, we put a footnote there, one or whatever is the proper number or whatever to put on there,
And then make it
letter.
as a motion.
And then we footnote it that says 140 is being funded
They
now.
make a note.
The
They make a-
remaining 40 under the terms of our contract is subject to a coming back with something that would be approved by EIC. City council obviously has the right to come back and say, you can't do
So are
it.
you making that motion?
If it needs to be made into a motion.
Wait, I'm not sure if you're
What?
saying what you mean. Are you suggesting that the footnote
Gosh.
in,
The footnote would say.
well, I don't want to get it written
No,
down,
no.
the meeting's wrong, I apologize.
No, I agree,
but-
George. We'll
So
get this
are you
straight.
saying that basically the city council is going to be passed back the same budget and?
With a footnote.
With a footnote that says that the next 40,000 is not going to come back to the city council?
No, I'm suggesting that the next 40,000 has to come back to this group with an adequate presentation for it,
Right,
okay?
yes,
and
not
then
the council.
end there.
Let him-
No, he's saying that the council is gonna give us authority to do 180 if we wanted to go up to 180. Is that what you're saying? If we were to do 140 to start with, if they come back and ask for another 40, we have the right to give them that 40
That's
without
right.
going back to the city and
That's
without a
right.
city approval.
That's
Yes.
exactly right.
Well, okay.
Well, I'm just.
No, is
No,
that what you
I
meant?
understand the concern. I'm not trying to circumvent the city council's ability to look at this additional $40,000 funding. If what I'm suggesting does that, then I'm gonna withdraw my suggestion.
Because that's what it would be.
If that's what happens
That's what you
to it.
just
Is that what
explained.
happens, Mike?
Well,
we
I've been trying to
footnote-
keep up, so.
Okay, if we put, okay, well, let me restate it, since I'm probably gonna have to do a motion here or something, maybe. We leave the 180 in the budget as it is right now we send the budget back with one modification, and correct me if I misstate this. And the modification would be a footnote here that says only 140,000 of this has been approved. Bearing in mind, we have a contractual obligation with other players in this
Right.
anyhow, and parties, that there'd be a footnote there that the $40,000 is contingent upon coming in with an acceptable proposal of some sort, okay, to get that additional $40,000. We're not committing the 40 at all. I mean, it's not gonna be just come in and ask for 40 and you get it. And bear in mind, they still have another, I forget the exact number is, but there's like another $60,000 in reserve, which is, I kind of figured Brian came back with the 40 reduction so that we wouldn't take 100 away from it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay, but basically what you're saying is the same budget as it is now, because the city council has that, without a footnote or with a footnote, nothing really would change to the city council.
It'd just
because
be clarifying what's going on.
It'd be clarifying what's going on, but
Yeah.
still the council would not get any approval over what future spending was going on.
Okay, so
See
let
what
me
I'm
make
saying?
sure, I'm new here.
No,
It
I am
has
too.
been pointed out, I'm new. But if indeed they come in here with a proposal for $40,000, does city council not have the right to look at that, Mike?
Well, I think under the plan that you're proposing is you're going to tell council you've appropriated the $180,000.
Right.
Mhm.
So the council
So-
would not have
so-
the
Okay,
ability
so then
to
they
come
wouldn't
in
have it.
and, right, correct.
Well, I don't, I'm back to my initial response. I don't have any problem with city council second guessing our deal. I don't take affront to it in any way. And, I'm not gonna move anything that's gonna take city council's right to even look at it again. I don't think that's correct. That's my opinion.
Well, if we don't do anything different, is the KEDC gonna get 140 or 180,000?
It depends on if, city council approves our budget.
So they could come back and approve 140 and change our budget.
Nope.
We can't
No.
change, the city council can't change the budget that's presented
Okay,
to
well,
them.
that's
They
fine.
can just say yay or nay. So if we present them with a budget saying 180 and they decide they do like it, then it's done. If they decide they don't, then EIC, it's a back and forth game until
Okay,
that gets
okay.
worked out.
All right, at least I understand where we stand.
Certainly. Name and
Bruce
address.
Strachey, 821 Earl Garrett. So I'm looking at the different parts of the budget here, and so, for example, in category 2, it says that, in the second bullet says, include $750,000 for the second of 2 allocations for upgrades to the tennis center. First allocation of $750 issued fiscal year 2017, and then it has a note, the city council and EIC have a funding agreement for up to $1.5 million to fund the design and engineering and construction of the facility. So that's a budget item that is up to a certain level. And as long as it stays within that level, the EIC has the right to approve that budget. But it comes back at $1.2 million, that's okay too, right?
I thought that was 750 for 2 different years.
It is, but it's up to $1.5 million total.
That's correct.
That's
You're
right.
talking about a
So,
million two
so
total.
if it comes in at $1.2 million, that's okay. If they need $1.45 million, that's okay too, right?
Right.
Isn't that exactly what we're talking about here? We're talking about up to 180,
Yes.
but right now we're gonna give them 140 because we think that's all they need.
Correct.
Right.
That's
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
But that doesn't resolve the issue of whether the city council has a right to act on it. Because there's
I don't know what city
in the budget.
council
Well,
can
I don't either.
do
Right, but this budget has 180
to
in it.
help the process. Say
And we
again.
don't know if that's gonna add up to $1.5 million or not yet,
Correct.
right? But it's been approved up to $1.05 million.
That's right.
Maybe that would work here with the EDC, the budget would be approved up to 180.
That's right.
And that's what has been approved.
That would
That's
be
why
no
we
And
different
that's what we
than,
sent.
that'd be no different than what's been doing on other items.
Correct.
Correct.
That's what we sent over, Bruce.
So is there any more discussion on this item?
I hope not.
I'd like to make a motion
Okay,
that we approve the $180,000 as recommended.
I second it.
have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Again, remember, this is the same motion. Actually, it's not the same motion. This would be different. It's total of up to $180,000.
Yeah, I would if you don't mind, just clarify that what you're really doing is proposing to approve the budget as presented,
Right.
because that's really what we're doing.
If that's the proper wording, I make a motion that we approve the budget as presented.
Motion
Second it.
and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, raise your right hand. Vote carries 4-3. All right, on to item 4A, which is appoint the members of the Economic Improvement Corporation to the ad hoc subcommittee that was discussed September 7th of 2017 at the joint EIC Kerrville Economic Development Corporation meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move that Ken Early and Sherry Patella be on that committee.
Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Wilson, because I know that you don't like it when I talk, but in this particular one, you know, I think everybody agrees that more information, more discussion, public involvement, transparency, all that is all a good thing, and I don't disagree. Self-evaluation is acceptable, however, in this particular case, I think constructive evaluation of this process is going to need to include evaluation from players and citizens who are not currently invested in this process, in the status quo. You know, I've said it previously, the status quo may ultimately be what we decide to do, just keep it all the same, but until we take a hard look at it, I don't know that we can confirm that that's, you know, what we want. You know, everybody up here is appointed, I got elected, unopposed, whatnot, but in the most recent elections over the past few years, there's been a growing push for openness and transparency, and the public not only wants to know what is being done by government, but they also want to very much to know why something is being done. And I'm in favor of meetings being held to discuss these processes. I'm not in favor of the format being proposed, as it necessarily excludes the public involvement. Whether that's direct input or even just allowing citizens to come watch the proceedings, similar to how the city handles its budget workshops. Furthermore, because of how the structure of this proposed subcommittee was presented last week, modification to its structure will need to be made in order to stay in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. During the discussion that we had at that meeting, Kenneth described the reasoning behind the makeup of the subcommittee by saying, if we have more than 3 EIC members, it's a public meeting, which has to have notice and step through a number of hoops to get there. So if we can limit our involvement, it makes it a little more conducive to having a meeting in a timely manner. Meetings of less than a quorum can be allowable. However, I think Mr. Hayes can confirm it would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act to intentionally circumvent the Open Meetings Act by carefully choosing the number of committee members at just under a quorum. I verified that with TML, but I had heard that before. If we intentionally circumvent, or we take action to circumvent the Open Meetings Act, we're violating the Open Meetings Act. Does that?
Do you want me to, okay, well.
I'm asking you, yes.
Yeah, certainly you've stated the law correct. If you intentionally circumvent the act, I don't think you're doing that. Boards meet with subcommittees all the time. Now, if you created 3 subcommittees on the same issue and we went from subcommittee to subcommittee considering the same issue so that you'd have to post, then that's circumventing the act. But
I know
appointing a subcommittee, just like we do with council to hear, you know, applicants for various boards, that's not circumventing the act.
Appointing a subcommittee isn't, but actually stating the reasoning for choosing the number of members as being to, you know, not have to jump through the hoops of the open meeting, posting public meeting, that's going to make it an intentional circumvention, which I don't expect to be appointed to this subcommittee, but if it's an open meetings violation, everybody attending those meetings is violating that act. I don't know that that's a good place to put the members, only to avoid, I'm not sure what. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, isn't the litmus test to circumvention that you have to actually prove that that was the intent? And if we have a statement saying that, I mean, the statement is saying if we have more than 3 EIC members, it's a public meeting, which has to have notice and step through a number of hoops to get there. So if we can limit our involvement, it makes it a little more conducive to having a meeting in a timely manner. That's basically saying we chose it to avoid the confines of the Open Meetings Act, is it not?
But I don't know if his intent was to avoid posting, you know, or holding a public meeting where people could talk.
But it is to avoid posting public meetings, which is the act.
Is that not the same way that you referred to the committees, other committees being formed? I mean, subcommittees, I mean, if every subcommittee had to post an open meeting agenda.
Right, I mean, it's very factual basis. I mean, I'm not in the business of, you know, that would be up to the DA to consider whether they would move forward with the charge under that circumstance. And I mean, it's very fact specific. So I think you make a valid point about, whether this ought to be, how open it ought to be and the number of members. I think that's fine. But
Well, there's a distinction.
I'm not going to go through the analysis. I don't think that's productive for this meeting and for you all and for me to do that in public about what constitutes intentional violation of criminal law.
Okay, well, basically, all I'm saying to get to there is not to cancel the committee. I'm saying that I think the distinction, just so everybody understands, the distinction between what we have currently with subcommittees is no statement has been made that we're trying to avoid public meetings. We just are having a committee. We're choosing to have a small committee. Those are workshop committees. Those are no problem. It's the statement that got us in the bind. And I'm not suggesting we don't have the committee. I'm suggesting that we still have the committee. We just modify the structure and live with the public posting of them.
May I have a moment, George?
Absolutely.
I came to the last council meeting. I was ejected because of the quorum. If it's an open meeting, why do we get put out of the room when there's a quorum from one group or the other?
Okay.
If it's an open meeting.
All right.
I don't understand that, and I'd like it to be clarified. I went outside, was invited outside. They said, you can stay, you can watch it on television. Well, I could watch it, but because of my age and my hearing, I couldn't hear it because the system's not that great.
Right.
So maybe we get something in the budget to upgrade the system.
We can get something in the budget to upgrade
So
the
we
system.
can sit outside
Okay.
and
All right.
enjoy the circus.
Okay. Now, as far as what the difference is between there, basically what needed to occur is, and as I understand it, Ms. Craig had actually emailed people with the question of if they were going to attend, because what should have happened there is it was an open meeting. In order for everybody on EIC or a quorum or more to attend it, that had to be posted as a meeting, and it wasn't 72 hours ahead of that meeting. So that would have gotten it through. I don't know that you got an email, but I know she had emailed people asking if they thought they would attend. So, anyways.
We got a motion on the table.
2 points.
We do have a-
I got ejected as well. And I've addressed
You
that.
check it out and went home.
I can sit more comfortably at home than out here. Better sound system too. And, but also the meeting that we had with the EIC and the KEDC. At that meeting, the suggestion with respect to subcommittees was, and Ken, it was your suggestion, that there to be 3 people selected by EIC, 3 people selected by KEDC. I made the comment that I thought there ought to be public involvement either by town hall meetings or survey in the newspaper or something like that. Not thinking, of course, that these were going to be 3 EIC members, which we just talked about 2, or 3 KEDC members. I thought this was going to be something that people who were not on these boards, that this would be something with people who are bringing information to the Comprehensive Plan Committee. And I don't know how many of you all are on the Comprehensive Plan Committee. I am not. Don't want to be really, but I'm not on there. But I think anybody who's on the Comprehensive Plan Committee should not be any of these 3 people. And I don't know who's on that Comprehensive Plan Committee.
It has not been
Well,
established.
that's what I don't know, but I think that this subcommittee ought to have 3 people selected by EIC, which is what we talked about, not particularly 3 EIC board members. We could select this gentleman, I don't even know him, and Bruce. I'd never put Bruce on there. I'm kidding, Bruce. But I mean, somebody we just take 3 people from here and 3 people from there. And frankly, we could throw 3 people on from the community if we wanted to. But I think having town hall meetings kind of accomplishes the same purpose. But today, here we've selected 2 people to be there. Well, what about the 3rd? Who is that?
There were 3.
Still you
I
and-
think he
you
said
and Shirley.
he nominated 2
us.
people.
I
Well-
nominate 2 people.
But so we have a motion on the table.
We never got past that.
Well, I know, but aren't we supposed to nominate 3?
Yes.
Yes, but we've
Yeah.
only nominated 2 so far.
We nominated 2 so far. I nominated 2.
No, okay, well, I think that if anybody here knows they're one of those two and they know they're gonna be on the comprehensive plan committee, I think they should basically, I don't know if recuse is exactly the right word for it, but I think they shouldn't be on both things. I
Well,
think it's kind
I
of.
think you guys are looking at what I'm trying to accomplish, or my thought was with putting the two groups together. You're looking at it a little too narrowly. Remember, the first task that I wanted everyone to determine was, what is economic development? We're even among ourselves. The more tenured you get on this committee, the more you understand what economic development is, and I think we're too narrow there. And so I think we think that KEDC does 100% of the economic development in our community, and I think that as time goes by, you'll see that's not quite the case.
It's not
And
at all.
so the point was someone from EIC, and it could be one person. My thought was three. My thought was that I did not want to go to the extent of having both committees together because of the posting of the meetings.
Which is George's point.
Well, but the point of that is not to avoid the public meeting. It's to allow us to have more time, because when you look, all the staff have to show up for public meetings because that's their duty. And so now you have to get all this into an agenda, and this could take forever for us to get the meetings accomplished. I took a lot of notes, and those notes included exactly what you talked about.
Sure.
Having input from the public, having town hall meetings, having all those things occur. And so all of that will come. It's not going to be those 6 people making the decision what economic development is for our community.
No, they're making recommendations to the
Well,
comprehensive plan committee.
they're
That's
just the
all.
ones on the committee.
Yeah.
I think those meetings will expand beyond that to get to what we're looking for. But much like George serves on EIC from the council, that's what 3 people are going to be serving to do, is have input.
A question, there were other members, wasn't the county gonna have some people on it was gonna be more than just the 3 and the 3, wasn't it? I thought
It's
that-
just 3 and 3.
Oh, I thought
And the county
asked-
has a voice in KEDC.
Okay, they didn't ask for any membership at all on the meeting, at the meeting?
They have chosen their 3, and that would include Don Barnett. It includes Mayor Bonnie White, and it also includes Tom Mosier.
Okay.
So yes, the county will be represented there as well.
So we're talking about 9 people now?
No, it's just 6.
Just 6.
3 from EIC and 3 from KEDC. And so
And we have
far,
a
we only
motion
have
on the
5.
floor for 2 of
For
them.
2 of them.
Okay.
So before we go further, I'm going to make one comment, and then I'm going to shut up for the rest of the discussion. Well, it's 2 comments, sorry. First is the agenda item actually is us appointing members to a committee we never actually agreed to form, which is his own thing. But the deal with the Open Meetings Act isn't that it's about public meetings, it's about the Open Meetings Act, which is a law that attaches criminal charges to each of us. And when we're saying that the reason we're only selecting a certain number is in order so that we don't have to post meetings, that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act, because the posting of meetings is a part of the act that we're circumventing. So I reiterate, again, with our own city attorney sitting here, I don't see how we could move forward with that without risking criminal charges. So I'm done. Go ahead and make your discussion.
You know,
We have
I've already made my
a
motion.
motion for 2 names, and we also have a second for those 2 names. Do we have a third?
Are we going to vote on the motion?
We can vote on those now.
Vote
I
on
make
the
a
2.
motion that Mr. Wilson be appointed as a 3rd member.
I'll second that.
Can I just throw in a comment?
Sure.
I think it would be very advisable, okay, to clarify this issue with respect to what that George has brought up. And I would suggest that we ask our city attorney to look into that issue. I think there's some attorney general opinions that are directly on point with respect to this issue. And I think before we jump into putting somebody in a potential problem, that we ought to probably get an opinion. Okay? I think that would be wise.
Mike, is that advisable?
You know, this is the dilemma that I face at meetings. You know, you all are having a policy debate, but you're throwing it back to me to kind of be the referee. So that's my first statement. This is one of those things, I mean, I was at the previous meeting, I didn't hear anything that Mr. Early said that gave me pause, that I thought that he was intentionally violating or suggesting an intentional violation of the Open Meetings Act, okay? I'm very cognizant of the Open Meetings Act. I advise my client periodically on AG opinions and newspaper articles where other communities have gotten into trouble with respect to the Open Meetings Act. So I'm pretty aware of it, I'm sensitive to it. I throw out advice all the time about it. Again, that said, I didn't hear anything that gave me pause that by appointing a subcommittee, you were intending to violate the act. I think that's the key. That being said, I don't prosecute for violations of the Open Meetings Act. And you have to keep that in mind as well.
Well, I'm too old to start a fight, but too slow to run from one. I stand by my motion.
Okay. So do we have a second
I
to?
have a second.
We have a motion and a second to the first motion. And then, kind of out of order, a motion and a second to a second motion. So let's vote on the first motion, which was the appointment of Kenneth Early and Sherry Patillo to serve on the subcommittee. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? 4-3, that motion carries. Second motion was the appointment of Jim Wilson on the subcommittee, and we had that seconded by Sherry. And so all those in favor, raise your right hand. And all those opposed?
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Brady, you did not vote on either one.
I know, I'm not sure that it's, except,
Yeah.
I'm afraid of the legality of it, to be honest with you, and under the
Well,
circumstances.
you are more than welcome to vote against it, but I do need some kind of vote.
Okay, well, if I'm being told I'm okay with that, then I'll vote against it.
I'd like to state that my opposition is not as to the people being appointed, it's as to the legal issue. I have been a lawyer since 1967 and have a considerable experience in economic development. And
Sure.
there you go.
I'd like to second what he just said. Thank you.
All right, those motions carry. On to item number 4C, which is the review and consideration of funding application for assistance with public infrastructure extension along Thompson Road related to a private development.
I have a
So-
point of order I'd like
Sure.
to make on this. That's actually a point of order to defer discussion and action. And I'd like to make that. I appreciate very much the presentation that's in our packet on this issue. But according to the presentation, the requested funding pertains to property that is not within the city of Kerrville. It has not been through the appropriate and required procedure for annexation, including public hearings, has not been through the city's planning and zoning department to attain appropriate zoning. I think it's way too early in the development process for us to have any discussion or take any action. There's way too much. I think it's a wonderful deal. I'm not opposing what they're doing. My comment is that this is way too soon in the process. We have any reason to discuss something that's not even in the city, hasn't been requested to be in the city, or at least no action's been taken, public action. Zoning is not there. Utilities are not there. I just think it's good. I think it ought to be brought back at the appropriate time. I just don't think this is the right time. So I'd like to move, like a motion, that any discussion of this request for funding be deferred until the annexation and zoning comes about.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would second that with the added comment that my biggest issue wasn't the project. It was that I didn't get the packet until late Friday evening, and any questions I may or may not have had, basically I had them over the weekend, so I wasn't going to get them responded to, and I just would prefer more time to ask the questions about what I'm seeing in the packet. I mean, I don't have a problem with the presentation going on, but I don't feel confident making the decision until I kind of hash through that.
Okay.
But anyway, so I'm seconding that.
Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. President, board members. My name is Justin MacDonald. I'm here on behalf of the applicant here. I would state, first of all, to Mr. Cooper's concern that the EIC's mission is to fund projects within the city of Kerrville and surrounding areas, which this is surrounded on 3 sides of the city, so I think that would qualify. There is also a history of the EIC funding projects that are just outside the city limits, the Hill Country Shooting Sports Center being one that comes immediately to mind. As far as Mr. Baruti's concern about questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions you've got after the presentation. You know, we've been working with city staff for a couple months on this, so I think I would request that we have our fair hearing in front of you guys, because we've put a lot of work into this. And for those of you that are involved in economic development or have experience in the real estate development process, you know that time is money. We've been working on this for a very long time, and we would request that you vote against this motion and allow us to make our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? By the way,
Yes.
we can hear their presentation, and it'll give you the opportunity to ask questions. It doesn't mean we have to do anything with their request, so keep that in
My
mind.
motion was that we have no discussion or action on this. They want to make a presentation.
Any
God bless
motion
them.
is followed by
Yeah.
discussion in the order.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chair, some good points raised, although I would point out, and the applicants somewhat alluded to this, is when you do an economic development, oftentimes you're working with a piece of property that's outside of the city, whether it's future tax abatement or what have you. And so this is the beginning of a process. And so part of the condition might be, just like with Comanche Trace, portions of that have come into the city over time as part of a developer agreement. So it's prospective, and it wouldn't be at all uncommon for an economic development deal to be with a piece of property that's outside of the city to begin with, but by the time the process is done or part of the agreement, that would be achieved. And then these oftentimes take weeks to unfold, in a couple of months at least, for a decision to be made. So again, think of this as the beginning of the process, where even today we want to go into executive session with you all to discuss some deal points that you might want to weigh in on. And so it's unlikely that you might make a decision all here in one day.
Okay, I appreciate that,
Thank you.
Mark, but my concern was the presentation itself. The presentation is for a funding,
sure.
okay?
I
So
understand that.
what I'm saying is, how can we take any action on funding when it's not even there? I mean, we can hear a discussion about it. If they want to discuss it, that's grand, okay? And, but I just don't see how we can do anything. I mean, we're being asked to agree to fund $850,000, and that might not even be a good number on something that is very, by its own definition here, this is a very prospective sort of thing. I don't really know exactly what they're gonna be doing, other than it's kind of sort of be like the other stuff that you've done around town. I'm very familiar with your other 4 projects. And so I just, you know, it's not the deal, and it's not the people, it's, man, maybe I'm just confused, but it sounds to me like they're asking for $850,000 and for us to do something, and they're telling us that that's our obligation to do it, or to hear it, and to consider it, and it's all in line with what we're doing. And I just think it's way too early.
How about this? Let's go ahead, leave his motion a second on the
Sure.
table.
Yeah.
Let's hear the presentation if they'd like to do that, and we'll deal with the motion after that. How about that? All right.
So we do have a motion and a second, so we do need to vote on that.
Oh, okay, well, then before we do that-
Unless someone wants to remove that motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
We're just gonna listen to it. We're not gonna discuss it. We're not gonna take any action on it.
Correct?
Well, but Kenneth is saying we have a motion and a second on the table, and my comment is, if he's gonna give a presentation, and to your point, Mr. Broody, you asked for more information, I'd like more information too, so, and you offered to answer any questions that we might have, I'm certain there will be some, that constitutes discussion, so that's my 2 cents worth on that, if we're gonna vote.
So would you like to continue your motion, or?
You
would
betcha.
Okay.
Mr. President, I would like to just state for the record that if the possibility of action is not on the table today, we'd rather not waste everyone's time. So just let us know if you want to hear from us or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. So
Got a motion?
I'm not sure if there is the possibility of action today or not, without hearing the presentation. So, EA, would you like to speak to that?
Well, I'll just speak to the agenda, and it is posted for us to be able to present some information to you within executive session, should you choose to, and certainly you can take action once you come out of executive session. So you do have that possibility. The way that the normal process works, we bring a project forth to EIC for review via the funding application. You direct staff either to move forward with a funding agreement or not, or for the developer to revise the application and bring additional information back to you. So those are really essentially the 3 different courses of action you could have tonight.
Certainly. And my assumption was we could easily accommodate all of those issues. Yes, sir.
Granger McDonald, 2951 Fall Creek Road. I think we're completely out of order here. I mean, I've done this we're in 41 different communities in 27 cities in Texas. And typically what happens is there's a commitment to work with the developer. And at that time, the developer starts forward with your zoning process, which includes annexation. And there's absolutely no reason for us to spend the time and money on that if we don't have some idea and semblance that we have even a chance of working out an agreement. It would be a ludicrous investment on our part. So what you're really saying is, until we get around to annexing you, we don't want to see you. And so what we're doing is we're saying we're not going to have more housing in Kerrville. There's very few tracts of ground in Kerrville in the city that are available right now to be developed for affordable housing or for any type of housing, including in the same areas that we've already developed, like on Clearwater Paseo, because of the problem with the lift station out that way. I've literally scoured this entire town regularly. Bruce Strachey, I think, can tell you the same thing. And so if we're going to work together as a partnership, we need to start working on knowing where y'all are. If you're not interested, just say so, and we'll go to Fredericksburg or somewhere else.
Well, I believe just 2 of the 7 members spoke up in such a way that made you feel that way. The rest of us did, and I would like for us to follow through with the motion and the second and determine if, as you just said, our board is interested in hearing.
Every time we have a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce, any group in the world, the first thing we start talking about is Kerrville needs more housing.
I agree.
That's the first thing we talk about. So are we going to put our money where our mouth is or not? And if it's not, that's fine. I can live with that decision. But, let's don't kid each other.
okay, let me say, because I just got lumped in with something that isn't right. I didn't actually say no because of anything except for the fact
Absolutely,
that
I
the
understand
facts
exactly
got
where
to
you're
me.
coming from.
And so I'm feeling honestly a little bit pressured to make a decision on something that's
We're not
pretty
asking.
multifaceted.
We're not asking for anybody to make a decision at all. We're not even asking you to tell us to commit to funding at all. We're asking to take a look, feedback, where you're coming from, and the entire process. But the motion was made that nothing happened until we are annexed and zoned, and we cannot do that, sir. I understand exactly where you're coming from. If I'd have had any control over the fact, you wouldn't have had the package much earlier. I'm sorry for that.
anyways.
Well, to the extent that was confusing, it's because the request sounds like you're asking for funding. Okay, it's the way it's drafted.
Our problem is we have to use the form that's given to us by the EDC.
This is straight out of KT, yeah.
And we have to use the form. If it had been our form, it had said something different.
His motion, kill it.
Says it's seeking 4B tax funding, and so I'm really more interested, I'd love to hear your proposal. Matter of fact, I've read your proposal, okay? And it's good, and I've looked at your website, and I've looked at your other locations in your other cities, and I've looked at all the reviews of your tenants, and they seem to be incredible. I like that, all of that. That's good. It has nothing to do with this, other than I thought you were asking us to take some sort of action to agree to fund something, it is way too soon.
Well, if you'll recall EA's comment, which was you have 3 options: fund, not fund, or get more information. So I think all of those things would be taken care of as we go through this process.
Well,
And certainly
more information will probably help.
Yes.
And certainly
As long as we're not being asked to take any action.
And certainly we would know that any commitment made at this point would be subject to annexation, zoning, et cetera, in the whole process. We realize that doesn't mean you're gonna write a check for $850,000 in the morning, we can just run by and pick it up.
I fully understand that.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
I just.
We have a
Thanks,
motion,
Ranger.
second. I wanna cut off the discussion.
Well,
Go ahead and have the vote.
I'll just withdraw the motion because I think we now understand what we're talking
Okay.
about. Okay, and I think that the confusion, which lies with words, is mine, because I thought they were looking for funding or an agreement to fund, and I just don't think we've got enough information to do that.
Okay. So, let's move forward with the presentation, Justin.
Thank you for agreeing to hear us this afternoon. Again, my name is Justin McDonald, president of McDonald and Associates and the McDonald Companies based here in Kerrville. We are coming to you this afternoon asking for eventually to have $850,000 VIC funding, which would go towards the construction of $1,850,000 public infrastructure installation along Thompson Drive. To your question that you mentioned earlier, Mr. Cooper, we have actually spent thousands of dollars and had pretty extensive engineering done already. We have a full set of plans which have been reviewed by the city of Kerrville, and we do have 3 bids from qualified contractors, so we do know exactly what this should cost.
I would hope that you would.
In addition to our property, city staff has also mentioned that there are opportunities to oversize this infrastructure for future expansion. We do have our engineer here with us today who has got some pricing estimates that we can discuss on that if you guys would like to at a later point. We do feel that this will open up our property and literally hundreds of acres of developable property along the Guadalupe River, along Thompson Drive on the southwest edge of town. As mentioned, one of the EIC's charges is to participate in public infrastructure that results in the public benefit. Because of opening up this whole area of town, increasing the stock of affordable housing, and increased economic activity, we feel that this project qualifies. This project will benefit the public by generating substantial local economic activity in 3 different ways. It's new income and job opportunities for local residents and additional tax revenue for local governments. This is done 3 ways. First is the direct construction activity. This is the actual investment that our company will make in the property. That includes a significant amount of local labor and materials purchased. Then you have a ripple effect, which is when those labor and material purchases are then reapplied to the local economy by the folks that earn them in the first place. And then you have a long-term effect from residents living, spending, and paying taxes locally on the property that we open up. Just briefly, this is our location. This is all in your packet, so hopefully you've had a chance to see that. We have 30 acres at the intersection of James Road and Thompson Drive. We've also been working with the neighboring property, which is also approximately 30 acres, and we've also been in discussions with other property owners in the area. Yes, sir.
I'm geographically incompetent. Where on this would Saddlewood be, just so I can get an idea?
Saddlewood would be in the upper left corner
Okay.
of this picture.
Thank Thank you.
right where the road starts to bend.
I'm sorry, Justin, can you repeat the acreage you just mentioned?
Our property is approximately 30 acres,
Okay.
and the neighboring property is almost a mirror image of that tract. Our initial utility sizing has been done for those. However, we've been in discussions with the city to oversize to allow for additional acreage in that area to be added on later. I know this is very, very small. City staff does have a larger copy of this. I don't really know how to zoom in on this, but this is just kind of the bird's eye view of the utility lines that we would be constructing, both water and wastewater, primarily wastewater to service this site. I don't know how this laser pointer works.
Can you kind of say like,
Yeah,
okay,
y'all,
follow that green
it's
line
a little,
or follow
yeah,
that blue?
it's a little bit difficult because y'all are on different monitors than the rest of us, so I can't really use the laser pointer effectively. But if you go to kind of the top left of the screen, you can sort of find our property there, and you just basically the line will follow the route of Thompson Drive all the way down. It'll come down past the water plant, at which point we'll actually make the hill and go over that large hill that's got the steep cuts in it that you see, the sheer rock face, and then eventually past the state hospital and tie in at the top end of the Jefferson Street lift station that's there.
Okay.
It's actually on the south side of the river, but they call it Jefferson Street.
Justin, will any of that property be directly on the water, or will it be back up behind that?
Our property?
Yeah,
Yes, our 30 acres runs to the edge of the river.
edge of the river.
Yes, sir.
But what about the actual housing that we're talking about in this project? Where's that in relation to the water?
Our first phase, and again, we are applying on behalf of the entire property, not on just the first phase. But our first phase, which would consist of a 120-unit apartment complex, would be on what on this screen would be the leftmost corner of the property. So kind of the, I guess that would be southwest corner.
Are you still proposing it be as you show in this plan?
We've actually modified it slightly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yes, we are showing it's going to be probably 5 to 8 acres, as much as 10, depending on what is required for stormwater detention.
That's on page
and green
42 of
space.
the deal, Sherry.
So more or less backed up at Thompson Drive.
Yes, it will front on Thompson Drive. We feel like we can probably use a less dense use along the actual riverside itself that would be a little more appropriate for the environment there. A little about us, in case y'all aren't familiar with us, we are based here in Kerrville. We're a third-generation family business. You've actually got 2 of those generations here in the room with you today. We are owners and operators of our properties. We're not speculators. We're not buy and flip. We're not build and sell merchant builders. We buy these properties and we plan to hold them for the long term. We currently own and manage more than 3,500 units throughout the state of Texas, including 1,200 of those which are within 50 miles of Kerrville in the Texas Hill Country. We also employ 130 people, 30 of which are in Kerr County, and we would actually be expanding that by somewhere between 5 and 10 if we were to be awarded this project and go through with it. And you've got our website address there if you want to do further research. That actually is the end of my presentation because I wanted to keep it brief. I'd be happy to answer questions. Discretion of the board, we can go into executive session to discuss more details.
I have a question. This may not be an accurate assumption of mine. Is this to be an HTC project complex?
You mean housing tax credit?
Yes.
No, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's.
I've used the housing tax credit, HTC, yeah.
No, sir. This
It
will be a
not be.
conventionally financed project.
Cool. So there's no 30% rule, there's no anything. So
That is
many,
correct.
I mean, because many of your other complexes are HTC and even one HUD project, I understand.
We do have in the past at least developed quite a bit of low-income housing, and we certainly intend to continue doing that where it is needed. However, we also do a significant amount of conventional market rate housing, and we feel like that it would be best suited for Kerrville and for this location at this time.
I would think so as well. Okay, and that's really the only question I had. Thank you. Oh, by the way, you mentioned that you have discussed this with adjoining property owners or adjacent or other property owners, I think was the word you used.
Yes.
Have you discussed with them? I know you guys are gonna be making a sizable contribution to these lines.
I believe one of them is approaching the podium to answer that
Well-
question for you.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
hi.
Mr. Cooper, I'll introduce myself. My
Thank
name's
you.
Harvey Brinkman, 821 Earl Garrett, 306 River Hill.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I've heard your name many times.
It's interesting that these gentlemen are here for this purpose, and we know that it wasn't going to be if you guys, if we had scored 3 points, three-pointer on this shoot, we'd have been happy. We'll be glad to shoot free throws. We own, or I represent the owners of the 26 acres to the west of this property.
Okay.
Along the river.
The house, the one that's got the White House on it?
Yes, sir.
Good,
Yes, sir.
okay.
And it's interesting that the owners that I represent, we call ourselves Rio 28. We got 28 acres. And we are along the river. Knapp Road does bisect us down there.
Mhm.
But Knapp Road doesn't exist according to vocal engineering. And whether or not it'll ever get moved, we hope so. I just bring that up. That the other is, my partners are all apartment owners, builders. The partners I have own the Rio Verde Apartments
Oh, that's nice.
and River Hill Apartments.
Both very nice.
So they have a significant investment in our community also. Now, the reason Mr. McDonald and the McDonald Company's here is for their property, and using 10 acres and more eventually for the sewer. We have participated with the McDonald Company in hiring Matt Hoover to do the work that's been done, and it's to the significant amount. And I know that Ken Kalachny's been here. He has been presenting this all along to the city. We wanted their input. We want them. That's why these steps are done the way they are, in my opinion. And so this is not an ill thought out presentation in the sense that we're trying to bring it to you and want the money now. That wasn't it. We knew that we had to do city zoning. We had to be brought into the city, but why would we have done that in the first thing? We don't have any utilities. So we have to get utilities to the property.
I appreciate that.
Well, we want Mr. McDonald to go forward because we still would love to participate if we can and be involved and be brought into the city at the same time with the same zoning.
My question was, with respect to, I'll finish it. My question was, if you've spoken with adjoining property owners, Mr. Brinkman.
Yes, sir.
I know Bruce. I made a comment about Bruce. I didn't mean anything, Bruce, by that. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't have said it. But anyway, with respect to contribution for the cost of this line, because you guys are going to put a bunch of money on the cost of this line. I was wondering if adjoining property owners had y'all discussed a contribution from them, so it would lessen the amount of money needed from the EIC.
Well, we have. And I think I'd probably feel more comfortable relating those discussions in executive
Right,
session,
yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Cooper, because of the sensitivity of
I
that.
agree
and
with that.
The fact that we were negotiating with our neighbors on that. But yes, we have talked to all of the affected properties that would be touched by this line and asked them to participate. What you're seeing is sort of an aggregate number. And we still feel that the EIC's participation would need to be the $850,000, which is less than half of the total cost.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have to bring water, fresh water in, potable water? Do you need a line for that?
We do, but it's not nearly as significant of an investment as a cost as the wastewater line is.
Well,
it's included in the cost estimate.
I understand, but I think there are issues for using economic development money to provide for water transmission without a public vote. So I was just trying to.
No. This would end up getting tied to
No, yeah,
a project, so it's not, it wouldn't be seen as a water project on its own. It would be infrastructure tied to a development.
Exactly.
So it'd be
Correct, and
different.
there's a pretty long history of those type projects being funded here, and I believe that they're well within the 4B Act.
I had a question, with regard to the comments here about the opportunities to oversize the infrastructure for future expansion. I would
Yes,
just
ma'am.
like to hear some of your vision.
Sure, I guess really the most appropriate person or people would be city staff, because it was sort of, we looked at that at their request, and they've been working with our engineers. I don't know, Ken, do you want to address the oversizing options maybe, or is that?
I'm talking, I guess that when I ask for hearing what your vision is, I think there was something in the packet about other things being built nearby, whether it's restaurant or whether it's office space, et cetera. And so, and certainly we would have to have the infrastructure being oversized, but what is the vision that you have? I'm assuming that would be also projects of your own.
Oh, you're talking about for the remaining piece of our 30 acres?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we do envision a mixed-use development there at some point. We have done some preliminary market study for residential. We've previously been approached by commercial developers as well, but they got scared off by other projects that were sort of in the wings that I guess have not yet come to fruition still, without naming names. So I think commercial and retail would definitely be something that we would like to see as part of our mixed-use development, but it's really going to be market-driven when the time comes to develop that piece. So I think at this point, nothing is off the table other than, a heavy industrial use or something that just wouldn't be right for the community there.
So when you say phase one, you're speaking solely on the number of units being built in phase one. How many phases do you envision?
Well, again, that'll be largely determined by the market. So we're trying to get the apartment site in first, which would anchor this 30 acres and actually really 60 acres, more or less.
So that would be the
because we
completion
have-
of the phase one, is just the apartment units?
That is correct,
Okay.
and the utility line to that. But the
Right.
utility line is sized for the entire 60 acres.
Right.
And I can have our engineer come up and tell you sort of the calculations that he used on that, because he factored sort of a multitude of different scenarios, with it being restaurants, more apartments, single-family homes, that sort of thing. And so we've sort of estimated conservatively what that need would be, and have built or designed the line that we're going to be building to accommodate that. So for our 60 acres, there wouldn't actually be, that is the Rio 28 and the McDonald 60 acres, there wouldn't need to be any additional oversizing above what we've done. The additional oversizing that would come into play, which would be directly funded by the city, would be if any other property owners or if they wanted to size that for any additional property owner's property to be included in being served by that line. I know there's several 100-acre tract across the street from us that's vacant, and there's about 30 acres or so down Thompson Drive, kind of in the curve of the road, that's vacant, that could be developed at some point if utilities were available on that side of town.
And what about east of your property? What?
Again, we have been in contact with those property owners, and I'm probably not really comfortable discussing what they want to do in open session, but because we've been negotiating with them, but we have been in touch with them as well.
Let me ask you a question.
Thank you.
This area gets developed, are there any plans to do something with the loop to expand? Have you work with the state? Because it's, we got a 2-lane road going by there.
That is well above my pay grade.
Okay. My next other question is, in your application, you,
I would suggest that you bring that up to the comprehensive plan folks when they're doing that, and see if that could get added to the city's comprehensive plan and thoroughfare plan. And at that point, the city can take that to TxDOT as a request. I know there's a process for that.
another question, on your application here, it's not, maybe it's another literature you have provided, but you don't have anything about permanent employment estimates, part-time, any of that. Is that in another part of the package?
I believe it was in our application,
No, it
yes, sir.
I think it's 5 and 5 or something like that.
Oh, okay, it's where?
It's in that in the application.
Okay, I see the application, it's just not.
It's in there
I'm looking at a
somewhere.
different page.
Yeah, again, we're estimating 5 to 10 permanent employees at this particular one site. What that it does not account for is the construction employees that will be employed during the actual development of both the apartments and the remaining acreage. That also does not include the ripple effect that I alluded to, which we've actually submitted a study that didn't make it into your packet by the National Association of Home Builders that sort of estimates the economic impact long-term of a 100-unit, just typical apartment complex. And it's a pretty large ripple effect throughout the economy as to the number of jobs it creates. Oh, I've got it right here. Thank you.
I read it.
This sheet, okay. Yeah, and just stating for the record, the ripple effect creates approximately 160 jobs in the local economy.
Great. All right. Any further questions? Harvey, one more?
I want to thank Ms. Patillo for her question because it's a blank slate. I mean, we have the potential of doing something very significant for Kerrville, I feel, and I believe the McDonald group feels, and my group feels, that with almost a half acre of the lake, a constant level lake, it's frontage for a property that right a stone's throw from Starbucks, if you're really good.
Got a good arm.
Yeah, got a good arm. But, and what is the highest and best use? That gets exciting for Kerrville. I've been here for 40+ years. To me, the McDonald Group, the apartment builders we get, you can't talk about Avery, but Avery's been here a long time too, but the apartment builders have done a lot more in our economy, more than maybe they should be, in the sense of we all know we need to bring businesses here. How do you get them? You got to have housing for those people. You got to have nice housing, on the river housing. It's a blank slate. Are we a conference center site? Are we a hotel site? We don't know. You can't market something if you don't have the right tools to market with. A lot of people would come in and try to buy this and put it, and then try to come to you guys with water and sewer and that use, but we backed off from those guys. We did have it under contract for something.
Both sides.
Yep, all 60 acres. We backed away because we felt strongly that we didn't know what they were really wanting to do. And we wanted to play the whole card, all our cards, let everybody know what we're planning, and bring in something significant. So, blank slate, Ms. Patillo.
That's the way I see it. That's why I wondered. Yeah, I drive past there every single day.
Harvey,
It's a beautiful piece of
Harvey,
property.
Yes,
Can I ask you another question?
Yes, sir.
What you anticipate, and we've talked about this a number of times, what you and Bruce anticipate is that you're gonna have some commercial businesses on that area. Am I right about that, or am I off base?
I can see that. I even thought Tech Park at one time, a nicer upscale tech park. The Airport Commerce Park had an intent when it was done, and I don't think it was in the city limits when they ran water and sewer out there. And we aren't asking for what they did back then. I see a very mixed use, Mr. Wilson, is the best way I can put it, but type of business, there are people here that we know of that would like to upgrade their sites business-wise. And again, I guess that gets into executive session things, and we've talked to them, but we weren't ready to do anything or present anything. I think we've had 6 months of water sewer drawings or sewer drawings, and maybe a little bit longer. So we're in the process, but we're open to suggestions. We're open to thoughts. We want to make it as nice as we can.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Harvey.
Can I ask a question or two?
Sure.
All right, it's actually for Mr. McDonald. So, basically, I mean, we're talking about housing, obviously, and everybody understands that we need housing. So if you could just refresh my memory, what were the issues that had the Olympic Drive project shelved?
Utility service, same as this site. However, we've spoken with city staff at that time. So the bottom line issue is that there's a lift station at the base of, I believe, Loop 534, and somewhere around Legion Drive.
Legion lift station.
It's a Legion lift station. That's kind of the final point that pumps wastewater into the plant from most of that area of Kerrville.
Okay.
That lift station is already at capacity. So we looked at a site on Olympic Drive, as you mentioned, when we responded to the city's RFQ last year. We've also looked at sites up and down East Main. However, none of them work or will work in the near term. And by near term, I believe 2019 was the last that I saw that it was in the CIP for upgrade. And until that time, none of those sites work because they're served by that lift station. So by using this site, it actually goes in to the portion of the city's main collector system that has already been upgraded by dropping it in at the Jefferson Street lift station.
Okay.
So that the capacity is there.
Okay, just to be clear, and it's good to have it on record in this body. So how many different apartment projects or that you've looked at have been held up by the Legion lift station capacity issue?
Let's see, we've looked at Peterson Farm Road, we've looked at Olympic Drive, and we've looked at 2 sites on East Main, so that would be 4 that I can think of off the top of my head.
Right, good enough. And then back to the Olympic Drive option, in that one, you're gonna have to refresh.
Excuse me, I do stand corrected. Olympic Drive was proposed to be a low-income housing tax credit. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's only 3. Olympic Drive, the problem there was an issue with the financial markets and tax reform, and the low-income housing tax credit sort of potentially going away and uncertainty in that market. So that was actually a financial problem that changed overnight after the election.
Right.
So I do apologize. That was an incorrect statement I made. So I just wanted to correct the record.
In that project, am I wrong, or was in that one? I know it was the affordable housing, low-income housing, and whatnot. Was the asking amount like $750,000 or something like that?
I do not recall at this point. I think it was somewhere around there. And again, that was to construct the street to that site and the utility infrastructure that went in that street.
But where I was going with that is basically bang for the buck. You were also proposing a number of units more in that one, weren't you?
No, I don't believe so. I think it was around 120 as well.
Really?
I think that's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison, though, Mr. Baruti, because again, that was more of a targeted low-income development, whereas this will be a little more upscale, although still affordable for much of the Kerrville workforce. I think it's, plus you've also got an additional 50 acres that you're serving here, which you wouldn't be serving with what we were looking at.
Right, no, I understood that. I was just, okay. I guess the rest of it I would ask in executive session probably.
The reason I asked about this being a tax credit situation, HTC, was in your presentation, you used the same standards, the 5% and the 2% and all, and so I assumed that it was HTC. That's what I said. My assumption may be wrong, but that was my assumption, was based on your proposal.
And that is actually a function, and we do that everywhere because we feel like it's the right thing to do. To provide housing for the disabled in everything that we build.
That brought my confusion, was because it was straight out of their requirements. Yeah.
And there is also the Federal Fair Housing Act has some mandates as well that require some accessibility on anything developed since 1991.
All right. Any other questions?
I move that we move into executive session under sections, let's see here, 551.087 and 551.071 and 551.072. I don't know if that captured everything, but
Get us in there.
does that get us?
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor, raise your right hand. We are moving into executive session.
Do we have to identify who we're bringing in with us out there?
It is 6:20, and we're bringing the meeting back into regular session out of executive session. There were no decisions made in executive session. We want to start out by saying we are interested in funding your project, okay? So I know it was maybe a little unclear that that was where we were headed, but yes, we are very interested in funding your project. So I want you guys to understand that.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yes.
You're gonna make them.
Well, I move that staff gather more information so that we can proceed and our ability to analyze the project.
I second it.
Is that clear, staff?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? To have a motion to adjourn?
Well, we need to vote
We
on
need
that
to vote on
motion.
the motion.
Oh, we need to vote on a directive of staff. Dang. All right, so we have a motion and a second?
We have a motion and a second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed?
The left-handed.
Thank you very much. That motion carries. All right, do I have a
We
motion?
promise not to come back when the budget's in play. I had to try a lawsuit one time when a judge had a root canal during lunch, and it was.
Oh, Lord.
I learned the lesson. Some meetings you just don't go to.
All right. All those in favor of adjournment, raise your right hand. All right, we are adjourned.